I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Hollister Planning Commission to order at exactly 6 p.m. on 3/13/25. Staff, please call roll.
Commissioner Carla Torres de Luna. Here. Commissioner Damien Perez.
Here.
Commissioner Chair Steve Long.
Present.
And Commissioner Hani Maizuni is out this evening.
Okay. Commissioner Perez, do you mind leading us in the pledge?
Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Perez. Staff, do we have any speakers for public input?
We do not have any speakers.
Thank you. I see that there's no consent items or public hearing items. May we have the staff report?
Yes, this item will be presented by Senior Planner Amber Cameron and our consultant Greg Goodfellow from Placeworks. So go ahead, Amber.
Thank you. So tonight's item is in regards to objective design standards. This is a project that is in response to recent state law housing legislation that concerns streamlining development review and objective standards. In 2023, the City of Hollister applied for and was rewarded a grant through the Association of Monterey Bay Governments, REAP 2.0, to help us create design standards for multifamily housing and mixed-use developments within the downtown area. As Ms. Kelly just noted tonight, Greg Goodfellow will be guiding us through a presentation in regards to the key elements that will take place with this project. And with that, I'll pass it over to Greg.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. So as staff mentioned, I will be giving a presentation with some background on objective design standards, what they are, why the city is adopting them. Quick overview of the agenda. I'll introduce myself and the project. I'll give a background to ODS, sort of take a 30,000-foot view to give you context about why the city is studying and adopting them. And then I want to give you some background on what I call commitment to downtown design in the city of Hollister. The city's done a lot of work and has shown a lot of pride in its downtown, and I want to demonstrate how we can work from the foundation of design pride that the city has already shown into our new design guidelines, or design standards. I'll go over our project approach and then guide a discussion and get some feedback from commissioners about their thoughts on design in downtown and the process that we'll be undertaking. So once again, thank you for having me. All right, the project team. First of all, staff, who you're more familiar with, is Amber Cameron, the senior planner, Eva Kelly, our planning manager, and Jennifer Thompson, the city attorney. Again, thank you three for having me. My name is Greg Goodfellow. I'm a senior associate at Placeworks. I have been working on objective design standards projects throughout the Bay Area for the last few years in very diverse communities. I just finished creating a set of standards for Antioch, and I'm working also in Cupertino. I've done design standards in Pacifica, as well as for the county of Contra Costa. So a lot of diverse communities that are very either open space oriented, very, quote, technological urban, such as in Cupertino, or more suburban like Antioch. And I'm also working with David Early, our founder of Placeworks and now a senior advisor. All right, a quick welcome to the project. So at the most basic level, the city's in the process of developing what are called objective design standards for multifamily and residential mixed-use projects in the downtown mixed-use district. And I have three goals for tonight's study session. First of all, as I mentioned, I want to introduce the Planning Commission and the public to objective design standards. I'll use the acronym ODS from this point on. I would like to illustrate past and current approaches to downtown design here in Hollister. And then I would like to document the Planning Commission and the public's expectations, concerns, and ideas regarding these objective design standards. All right, a background to ODS. Let's start at the very highest level. I think everyone watching here knows that California is experiencing housing crisis. And some quick facts to bring this point home. There's certainly an insufficient supply of housing. There were 80,000 housing units built in the last decade versus 180,000 units that are needed. Unaffordability is at its highest rates. There are the lowest housing ownership rates in the state since 1940. 1.5 million households in the state devote more than half their income to rent, and California has 22% of the national homeless population. Some of the key challenges to housing in the state are the cost of materials and labor, and bringing this point more home to our topic tonight, state and local regulations can really hamper the production of housing. So in response to this statewide challenge, there's been a truly statewide response, namely in the passage of laws to boost production since 2017. It was really Jerry Brown who first started passing what are called these, quote, streamlining laws in 2017 to get more housing built. And since then, there's just been tens of laws, Senate bills and Assembly bills passed to boost housing production. And there are really two themes to these laws. First of all is that California needs multifamily housing. Single-family homes just aren't going to do it given the supply crisis. And one of the second themes is that discretionary review constrains housing production. First keyword here, discretionary. This is what's going to really lead into our discussion. Discretionary meaning the type of review that is based on individual perspective. One person can say, oh, I like this housing, where another could say, no, it doesn't fit my style. So that kind of review, that kind of ongoing discussion will constrain housing, and it takes too long. One of the common provisions in these laws is that cities can't deny multifamily projects based on subjective criteria. Again, a keyword, subjective, because subjective criteria is that which is open to personal discretion. And again, going back to my point, discretionary review constrains production. So in other words, cities can't use a sort of personal opinion type standard to deny housing, and I'll get further into that. And one of these laws, Senate Bill 330, it's called the Housing Crisis Act, really puts this bluntly, and this is a quote directly from the legislation. Cities can't disprove a multifamily housing project, including through design review, unless the project is shown to be inconsistent with objective, quantifiable standards. So again, here that word objective comes in, and I'll get further into what this means. So what this comes down to are design standards, which again are objective versus design guidelines. And the state, all jurisdictions throughout the state of California have traditionally relied on what are called design guidelines. And these are unquantifiable statements about what design should look like. These guidelines, based on these laws, no longer have approval authority because, again, they facilitate discretionary review. So this is where you can imagine design review boards sitting around looking at a project that's come into the city, and they're looking at a series of design guidelines, and my next slide will get into this further, but these guidelines include words such as complement or should look like this or should look like that. And now you have a design review board discussing these, debating what it means if the project really fits those laws. One person might agree, the group might say that it doesn't work, and so the developer has to go back, redesign it, send it back to the group who may debate over it again. So these are the types of things that these laws are trying to avoid. And the result of that is that only objective design standards can be used to disapprove a project. And the result of objective standards is that they are ministerial. Going back to this key word, a discretionary review involves personal opinion. A ministerial review is simply a checklist. Does it fit this standard? The window has to be 6 to 8 feet wide. Is the window that wide? Yes, check it. Once again, and in this box, here's where you get a very legal, sort of legalese definition. But the legal definition of these ODS are design standards that involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official and are uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criterion. Really what that means is these are standards that have to be a measurement, a very definable requirement, a rate, a percentage, a score. You know, they can be creative. You can say, you know, the building has to include this number of characteristics in its entryway, a path that's 6 to 8 feet wide, use of bricks that are the same color as the driveway, and you can get 3 out of 10 of those things, and then if you get that score, you pass the standard. So there are creative ways to do it, numeric ranges or required quantifiable options. But again, these are all objective standards that can be used in the review of multifamily housing. Some examples, I won't go all through these, but these are subjective versus objective guideline, or excuse me, review standards. In red, you'll see those subjective statements that could be argued over, that one person may feel are met, while another one might not. The apparent mass versus at least 100 feet. Sensitive to the neighborhood versus 5 feet in depth by 25 feet in length. Rooftop mechanical equipment should be screened versus rooftop mechanical equipment shall be screened from public view. Provide ample width and design for universal access. Well, what does that mean? Let's turn it into the paved section of sidewalk shall be at least 8 feet in width. So you're turning these subjective guidelines into objective standards. And again, those are what need to be used in order to disapprove or approve a housing project. So what are the applicable development types that ODS cover? First of all, what are subject to ODS? All multifamily residential projects. That can mean any project with 2 or more units, which of course is a huge range of development types. It could be a small duplex in a neighborhood, or a massive apartment building with 400 units in a downtown area, or a group of connected townhomes. So you're seeing a huge range of development types. And it also includes mixed-use development with at least 30% of its square footage dedicated to residential uses. So these could be the classic mixed-use buildings with a ground floor of retail and 2 or 3 floors above them with apartment units. What are not subject to ODS are single-family homes, sites that are not infill sites, meaning that less than 75% of their perimeter is developed. So nothing out in a green field or an open space area is subject to ODS. And of course, any housing sites on hazardous areas that would impact a natural resource on a wetlands or impact a historic resource. So really you can think of these things as the classic CEQA impacts. If it's the kind of thing that would really impact the built or the natural environment, the state does not want to streamline those projects. It wants those projects to get the full review. Sorry, I'm having trouble here moving forward with the clicker.
Try pointing that way, Craig.
Sorry, Amber. Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. All right. As I mentioned, I'd like to talk about how Hollister has created a foundation for downtown design in the past, because I would like to ensure the commissioners and the public that we can build from the city's existing priorities to create some quality design standards. Let me see if I can move ahead now. All right. So in 1991, Hollister created what's called its Downtown Strategy and Plan. This was a first step with standards and guidelines for downtown beautification. Just some examples. It was had a focus on landscaping with standards for how many trees needed to be planted, the types of plantings that would make the downtown beautiful, using landscaping to create buffers between properties. It had standards and guidelines for certain design details, everything down to paver selection, color of buildings, and other design standards. Now again, if you look at this document, of course, it's aging at this point, and it's not entirely relevant, and it also has a lot of these subjective standards, these shoulds, these complement, these words that don't lend themselves to a truly ministerial review process. Another important step was a year later when the city's documentation for its registration of the National Historic Register was completed. Kind of a pull quote from that paperwork is that this is a place with a strong sense of a small city's downtown in the period before World War II. So clearly, the city has really had a commitment to its historic nature and pride in downtown. More recently, but about 15 years ago, was the Hollister Downtown Plan. This was done by a consultant that we work with. And this was a very thorough document that included a lot of design standards and guidelines. A summary quote was that it was looking to orchestrate the overall development of downtown so that each development project contributes to a better, more livable downtown. It broke its guidelines into 4 primary building types based on size, and included some very typical building design topics: site planning, building form, landscaping, parking and service areas. And again, this is a document that, although a lot of the design guidance can't be used in this new legal environment, we can certainly pull from this. You can see in the photo here, it is very detailed. It does focus on everything from window treatments to facade treatments. And it's indicative of sort of the community pride in downtown that we can use to create our guidelines, or excuse me, our standards. All right, as you also know, the city has recently been working on its general plan update, and it also includes some very valuable design priorities that we know we need to support. Some examples: new downtown development must occur in the context of the existing building. We don't want anything springing up that is completely out of context. Safe and comfortable pedestrian experience are crucial. This is very common in objective design standards throughout the state. Some examples of this are design standards for the ground floor, ensuring that awnings are comfortable, that there's width on the sidewalk, that there are open spaces for seating, really making sure that pedestrians walking through these areas feel comfortable. Parking shall be placed to the side and behind new buildings. This is also common. And new development downtown must be sited and designed to reflect the existing layout, architectural style, character, massing, and height of existing buildings. So again, a big focus here is to make sure that new development, although it can't obviously mimic in its entirety the existing downtown, we need to find a way to create standards to ensure that it complements downtown. So moving forward, it's very clear we've got a solid foundation to build on. We have a great collection of design priorities, design guidelines, existing standards, historic documentation. So what we need to do is regulate design, admittedly in a very different legal context than these past efforts, but using a similar approach. And we need to maximize community interest and participation, because it's been very clear from past planning that this city cares about its downtown. And I think we have a great opportunity to do that. All right, so what might this current project look like? How are we going to pull this off? So this kind of crazy looking diagram I put together to show how this might work. So our first step, what I call the ODS background media, we're in that process now. You also saw the brochure that Placeworks put together with a lot of background on ODS. That, of course, is going to be available to the public. We'll take input in this process, and then we'll move that into the outreach process, which is a planning commission study session, of course, tonight. Then we're going to take the outreach to local stakeholders, talk to developers, architects, historical society members, and get their input on what they want to see in design standards downtown. And of course, even more importantly, is take it to Hollister residents. We have a community meeting planned in June or July, where I'll do the same type of education process that I'm doing tonight, give sample approaches to these standards, and get more current design priorities from the public. And then, of course, as in all projects, we'll take it back to elected officials for a joint study session. All of that will go back into the actual development of our draft design standards, which you all and the council will, of course, have the opportunity to review once they're complete. All right, to give you an idea of what ODS might look like, they are going to be adopted as part of the zoning code. Most cities that I've worked in and across the state really adopt them as a separate package. Imagine, a more design-oriented a package of standards that they could adopt via resolution in the zoning code. But really, these don't fit well in the actual zoning code because they will have graphics, they will have photographs. This is a very illustrated-oriented process. So what we need to do is integrate the downtown-specific design that I've been talking about, these design details that are so important downtown. They could be cornice design, roof and facade aesthetics. Those are some of the things that I've seen in these past documents that are important downtown. Historic architectural styles, you'll hear Italianate and Victorian. Now, that's going to be difficult. We can't expect all new development to mimic historic design, and that's something that will be one of the challenges we work with together. Ultimately, we want to take those very downtown specific elements into a more general package of design standards, leading into those more basic components such as site planning. Let's make sure that buildings are fronted towards the street they're on as opposed to set back to make sure they're pedestrian oriented. And then of course, building form and massing. What can we do to make sure buildings aren't just huge blocks? We can integrate recesses and projections. You can see that in some of these graphics from past documents. Services and parking. We want to make sure, of course, that while a parking lot isn't the first thing people see in a residential project, loading zones and trash collectors have to be able to get in, and we need to think about things like that. And then, of course, open space and landscaping. These could be private open spaces. How do we want to ensure that our balconies and patios are designed versus common open spaces? Something I've talked a lot about with cities is making sure that if you're building a large apartment complex or mixed-use complex, everybody has the same type of access to a big courtyard open space. We want to make sure that some buildings aren't too set back, whereas, resulting in the residents of those buildings feeling like they don't have the same access to this common open space. So there's so many things to think about in terms of all of these. And that's why it's so important to go through an outreach process. Some of these illustrations you're seeing here, the types of graphics we create, these are just a tiny example. Sort of the plan level drawings you're seeing are more for site planning, whereas when we get into the 3D or what we call axionometric drawings, that's where you get more into building and massing. But there's so many different ways to do this. We've done more sketchy, sort of hand-drawn graphics that go with landscaping more when we do our landscaping standards, so they can be more friendly and less formal, but they do have to support these objective, quantifiable standards. This is an example of what comes out of this. I use this word ministerial and checklist. This is from a different city, but what you can see is, I know this is hard to see, this is a list of the standards, and the idea is when a project comes into a staff member at a city, they can simply go through this and check. Did it comply? Yes. Did it comply? Yes. Again, this is the difference between a ministerial review and that discretionary review that is so different and can take so much time. This way, the project applicant knows she or he can go through this as well before the project is even submitted. Did I complete all the standards? Yes, I did. So this is used by the applicant and staff, and everybody can agree very easily, did the project comply with these standards? Again, that is the whole point of these streamlining laws. That is why these laws say you can only use standards such as this to approve or disapprove a project, because it doesn't take long. Okay, I have put together some questions for you just to think about. We don't have to go through all of them. We can certainly bring up other topics that you have, but I wanted to get you thinking about some of the issues that we'll be facing here. First of all, let's just start with the basics. After hearing my presentation, do you all have any questions about the legal background, the process, or the content that you need clarification on?
I have questions.
Uh,
So just to clarify, is this is a requirement that we fulfill this?
No, it's actually not. It's if you, the difficulty is if you don't fulfill them, you've lost your control over design in terms of projects. And this is where, this is kind of the biggest sort of reverse engineering of this. And this is what is difficult for so many people to understand. The state is not requiring anybody to adopt objective design standards. But what they are saying is if you don't, you can't use your guidelines to disapprove a project. So
Got it.
what's difficult about this is that a lot of jurisdictions feel, and understandably feel, that their control over design is being plucked away.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is that that's the value of adopting these. It's because you're maintaining all the control you can possibly have. And that's why what I want to do is help the city transfer its existing design priorities into a good set of standards. It's sort of the best you can do to maintain design control over residential projects. Because again, no, you don't have to adopt these, but if you don't, an
Then you
applicant can
can't
come in and
deny.
say, this is what I want to see. And you can't tell me I can't, because right now your standards are subjective.
Got it. Okay. And then, so once we adopt these, then we should use, the information that you talked about, right? The historic, the 2008, right, plan. Hold on. Right.
Well, once these are adopted, the value of those, those lose their approval authority entirely, except for if there are some objective standards that I went through in those. But the value of those is that, a designer, an architect, an applicant, if she or he wants, can go back in those and get at least a level of comfort, some grander context about what the city values. But like I said, what is in those documents can't be used ultimately
In the old ones, we have to use them in the new standards we adopt.
Right, as
Okay.
far as actually approving and reviewing projects, only these new standards can be
Got it.
used. And again, it's not just design that these laws regulate, it's, they basically say that no multifamily residential project can be disapproved with anything other than an objective quantifiable standard.
Okay.
So a development guideline or, a poorly written zoning code that is not objective, nothing like that can be used either.
Okay. And-
Only a quantifiable objective standard of any type can be used to disapprove a multifamily project.
And then a concern I had when you said, so once if we develop these standards, then it would make it faster for something to be approved versus being more thoroughly reviewed.
Well, correct. And again, that's the intent of these laws, is to make these things faster. And so that's why, and,
But that's a double-edged sword.
it is. And that's really, and you're not alone in that response. Trust me, this is something that local jurisdictions are grappling with in all levels of, this is the current sort of overarching issue of state planning right now, is this double-edged sword of wanting to increase housing versus loss of local control over the type of projects that are being built. And so what cities are finding is, we better arm ourselves as best we can with these objective standards to make sure that we are maintaining the most control we can have.
Okay, and then when you do have the public hearings and the calendar that you set, how are you gonna publicize for people to attend and? so
Well,
that
I'll
we-
work closely with Amber, and,
Okay.
I've, part of one of our actual submittals for our agreement was a public engagement plan, which I've submitted. It's very thorough. We'll do social media postings, and we've done this all throughout. We were the consultant who did the general plan update for the last 6 years, so we're very familiar with noticing and working at the Vets Hall and getting big spaces, so.
Okay, and for whoever's gonna plan, I hope that there's social media, postings, and I think just really getting our young people and just everybody, as many, so if someone weren't able to attend a session in one of these community sessions, would there be a way to, like a survey to do online instead of?
As an example, what I had just done in another city was we did an in-person workshop, and Placeworks created these huge poster boards with different topics. Whereas a design topic, it was, I fully agree, I partially agree, or I entirely disagree. So people came in and put stickers on so we could get a basic idea of where people want to go. And there was also an online Zoom poll that we left up and that the city has, been able to keep moving. So there's so many different ways to do this. We've done these with simple Google form surveys, which allow for a good graphic interface and things like that. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the commission?
I do, but I don't know if you want to go through the questions that were prepared in this one.
No, let's keep yours going. I think we might end up covering some of mine.
So, just a clarification, these are design standards to meet certain criteria, but not necessarily to meet the design of an architectural style, right?
Well, that is something that we'll have to work through. Here's an example. In the city of Santa Barbara, you may know they have a very intense sort of Spanish mission style. Their objective design standards are literally for sticking to that style and just saying, look, this has got to look like a white stucco, red tile rooftop. This is what we want. Whereas in Cupertino, their whole, we went through their design priorities in their other documents. They're all about diversity. They don't want every building looking like a certain style. So their focus is more on pedestrian orientation. And, one of their big topics was connectivity, making sure that new, larger developments, you don't have to drive out onto the street and then back into it, site planning issues. So it is up to you, and that's the value of me speaking to you and us doing this outreach to find out. I do think adhering to historical styles such as Italianate can be difficult, especially because the city also wants to expand these ultimately into other areas of the city. That's why I think we can take components of those styles, like I mentioned, cornice overhangs or certain facade elements, and integrate those into new development. But Santa Barbara knew what it wanted. That's the historical type of design there, and that's a rarity. Most cities are realizing that objective design standards are most useful when they cover the basics and they allow some flexibility in the design process. And that's kind of what I've seen in the last few years of doing these.
So this is just setting a standard baseline, basically.
Yeah. And, I was telling staff earlier, when these first started, they were seen as very architectural documents. Let's keep them very detailed, everything down to details such as, the width of windowsills, things like that, because cities were so concerned about losing all level of design control. But a problem with that is these laws have been evolving, and cities are, they're what we call RENA numbers. I'm not sure if you're aware of that yet. Are so, their state has asked them to plan for so many low income and medium income housing units that putting too much difficulty on applicants in terms of design stifles that ability to get those housing units planned. So I think there's a balance that's being sort of falling into place with objective design standards, where let's try to bring in at least our basic priorities, but at the same time, keep them achievable and usable for developers and for designers. Might help. Let me show. Oh,
I had another question. too.
Oh, go ahead.
So did you say it's specific to downtown only? The
This-
perimeter from, it said Monterey to Sally
Yeah. Do you have the?
on the map that you showed?
I think we have it on.
But that's what I saw.
Yeah, so it's not an explicit to
Yeah.
just San Benito Street downtown, but because we got grant funding for this, it's one of our requirements. So this is a picture of our downtown historic district, but our downtown district is around Hawkins Street at San Benito, and then you're looking Monterey to east, and then San Benito from Hawkins on the south side up to about First and Second Street. Is downtown, and we can get a little bit into the old town that surrounds downtown in these, but our grant focus did need to focus in this priority area. But it's the downtown commercial corridor and mixed use corridor, but also a little bit into our multifamily in our old town.
Okay, and then follow-up question, can you have the standards for the bigger space and then specific for the downtown, Old Town?
I would say we can probably talk and through this about a downtown core and then kind of so that's definitely,
You could do that?
we could definitely do that and have kind of 2 or maybe 3 kind of areas of focus, and we can in this document for sure.
Yeah, and because I would think that business owners would also be included in your stakeholder, right, specifically to at least this street.
Yeah,
Right
we'd
up.
like to work with HDA to
Okay.
hopefully get them to assist us.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to let the commission know on your digital packet, if you're to scroll down, there is the brochure, and that will have the DMU zoning district, so
Yeah.
you can
Thank you.
refer to that.
Does the commission have any further questions? Hearing none,
Okay.
continue.
So this is a slide I put together just to ask some questions about the actual content of design. I'm curious some of your thoughts. So that first question states, what components of a multifamily or mixed-use building have the greatest potential to impact or improve downtown character. In other words, when you three think about a building, is there something that comes to mind about, oh, we got to get this right, you know, or I've seen something where they do this that I really don't think is going to fit here. I mean, do you have any immediate responses to that? Is it the design of the facade? Is it sort of the location of parking? What do you think?
I mean, I have an opinion,
Sure. Great.
but it's not just mine. I mean, many of us talk about this. You know, coming downtown, I would not want to live here. You know, not because I don't think it's nice, but the downtown should be for the restaurants and for shopping, for music, for different things. So I support low income housing, but not here,
Yeah.
right? So is there a way to, you know, if it were to be in this area, is there a way to make it be on the off streets, right? And even
Yeah.
for the person living there,
Yeah.
wouldn't right, to live in a, right? You would want to be in a place where it's
But now we're getting into a different discussion, unfortunately, which is
not structured. Okay, gotcha.
which is a land use map, which has already been certified. I mean, this downtown mixed use district and the types of uses that are allowed in it are already adopted. And so these design guidelines will not affect what can be built where. You know, they are only explicitly design regulation for multifamily housing. So that's not something this project will do, is change where types of land uses can be.
But you did say that it would be using existing buildings, right? Or is that,
No, this would cover any
Any
new multifamily
new-
housing. What I had mentioned before was the priority to say, you know, new housing or new buildings should try to complement existing buildings that are around it or near it.
right?
But yeah, this would regulate the design of all new development once this is adopted, of course, development after that adoption process. So this is, I mean, further policy context, this comes out of an action in the newly adopted general plan update. There was an action item saying, I don't know I forget the exact wording, but it was basically study and adopt new objective design standards for the downtown area and
Well-
for the rest of the city ultimately.
I think parking is definitely an issue if you were to live here,
Mhm.
as it is when, you know, coming downtown, parking,
Mhm.
you know,
Now, again,
easily, I don't know, is that part
well,
of?
no, again, parking standards, you know, in other words, the amount of parking that is
done.
required, that's not a part of this, that's existing zoning in another place. But what we can talk about and what all objective standards do regulate is the location of parking. You know, a big thing, and that always came up in past discussions, is that nobody in their nice downtown districts or anywhere else wants their new multifamily buildings to be fronted by a huge parking lot. So a lot of what we've done in past objective standards is say, you know, buildings, 80% of a building needs to be fronted right at the front yard setback so that, you know, pedestrians walking by see this nice design, not a huge row of cars. And so parking has to be to the side or behind it. So again, these are all standards, and we can make these objective, like I just said, 80% of a building facade has to be within 4 to 5 feet of the existing setback. I mean, I know that sounds wonky, but what that says is, let's keep our buildings close, let's keep our nice retail stretches with residential on top accessible to passersby, so they don't have to walk through an ugly parking lot to get there, things like that. But again, we will not be changing requirements for the amount of parking that applicants have to provide.
What about green space?
Well, absolutely. A section, you know,
A rooftop or somewhere?
Amber, I'm sorry, would you progress me to the final slide, even past the closing slide? There's this one. This is an example of sort of how a document can be organized. Imagine you open it up to the first chapter. That's the purpose. We get into the background and make sure everyone understands the organization, the review process. We typically split design standards into two groups. One are sort of the larger mixed-use multifamily buildings. It's really hard to come up with design guidelines that transfer from a 4-story building to a little cute duplex. You just can't do it. So imagine in chapter 2, you have guidelines for larger buildings. It's split into these different sections: first site design, then building form, then pedestrian experience, and then common open space and landscaping. That's where we've talked about, you know, we have standards for if you, in your open space, you need to provide 4 of the following 10 amenities: a barbecue pit, an open space area for kids, benches that can be seated on, so there are really creative ways to do this. So yes, that does come in. Landscaping, you can do landscaping for those ugly, what are called fingers in parking lots that separate, we do those. Those need to be, let's say, 4 to 6 feet wide with 2 trees for every 6 feet, So yes, green space and open space is a huge part of this.
Okay, that's good. Do you guys think?
I mean, for our downtown, I'd like to see uniformity. I mean, there's just, you have modern, you have old, you have, somewhere in the middle. Just having some type of consistency. There's other downtowns in our, I'll just say, in our areas. Ours is unique.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to see, keep its uniqueness, but there has to be some kind of uniformity with the entire downtown. So I think the ODS basically brings that. And so I'm okay with a lot of it. Are we at the end of your presentation, or are we just midway, or, because I had some questions.
Yeah, no, this question period is the end.
That question first, though.
Okay.
As far as the components of multifamily, aside from green space, and for me it's affordability, and I think it starts with the design, right? So if we're really advocating through the standards that we push in this document for something that's really more costly to build, then I think that's gonna
Right.
directly correlate to the affordability. So
And-
for me, affordability would be like one of the key components.
And that's why, sorry to interrupt, that's why one of the stakeholder groups that we are going to work with are developers, because they're the ones, and I know this from past projects, that's where we get the greatest insight into, no, come on, man, that's gonna make this thing too expensive. We cannot add, a decorative balcony just because it looks great. You know what I mean? That's where we get this good insights on what is just too cost restrictive. So just so you know, that's part of what we'll do, is work with developers and local designers.
So the state law mandate on a mixed-use residential unit, how many units have to be affordable housing, how many are market value?
State law does not. We did adopt as a jurisdiction in August, I believe, our inclusionary housing ordinance. So now our local ordinance has a requirement of 15% of affordability, and then that's further split into the 3 levels of affordability. So that's our local requirement in our ordinance. So new housing projects will have to provide at least that 15% affordability because of our inclusionary housing ordinance.
And that'll be adopted in the ODS.
It won't be a part of this. What the ODS will do is that when a new housing project or a mixed-use project is proposed, we'll be able to tell them, if let's say we put in this 80% upfront on the frontage, like Greg was mentioning as an example, if we get a proposal in that has a parking lot in the front, we can tell them, you need to reorient your building because it's not meeting our requirement. Whereas right now, we have perhaps a handful of things in our zoning ordinance that are actually objective that we can actually apply and tell people to change the design and the planning of their project. This ODS document will give us a more detailed set of standards that we can really get into working with developers to redesign their projects in a way that meets our requirements. So our zoning district, like the downtown mixed use zoning district, allows commercial and allows residential at a higher density. So if someone wants to propose that, now we have this secondary design document that lets us detail design.
Yeah, it's just, think of it as any applicant, the first thing they'll do is say, all right, where am I building? And let me look at what zoning district I'm in. They're gonna see, oh, I'm in the DMU. They're certainly gonna open up the zoning code to find out all the regulation they have to abide by. And what they're going to see is you also have to abide by the objective design standards. So, ideally, and this is what happens 99% of the time, they'll design with this ODS booklet open. And therefore, ultimately, when it comes into the city, the design process is already done. It doesn't have to go through what can be such a delayed process of conversations and discretionary viewpoints. And I think this complements. No, it doesn't complement. I like the orange. No, it's not. You know what I mean? It ends that process of potential delays. It's just another part of the zoning code.
I had another one. Did you have more? So let's just say, could there also be a potential requirement where you, because, you know, you are in the downtown where you have mixed use, and then you ask whoever's developing, like for a rooftop, uh, call it rooftop, public, theater access, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like a
Sure.
multi-use,
Mhm.
facility.
Yeah.
Could that be a potential?
Yeah, we just, Sunnyvale, we had a whole section on rooftop open spaces, talked about, you know, the height of your parapet to make sure you're safe, the fact that, you know, both your ingress and your egress have to be a certain space away from the open area, you know, yeah, absolutely.
Just because I'm thinking of, you know, I think many of us are trying to make sure we keep our character, but also bring in business and have places for families to be, and whether that's music, theater, whatever it is, that could be a way. So, okay,
Now,
good
now
to
remember,
know.
this would only apply to residential buildings,
But
so-
it could be,
but the bottom could be retail, right? Yeah.
right? Okay.
Well,
I think he had several still here.
Yeah, but we've gotten into a bunch of them like I thought we might. I mean, this other one, can new development contribute to downtown without mimicking historic architectural style? Chair Belong, you hit on the fact that, you know, we can't just make everything into a diverse, you know, group of different styles. There is some value to uniformity. So that's, you know, part of the answer to that. I was just really looking into how strong this community is going to want to adhere to the, you know, the downtown, the historical vibe of downtown. And so I think that's something, to me, that's the challenge. One of the biggest challenges of this project is I know this community cares about its historic downtown. And, you know, how are we going to balance maintaining it, but also understanding that new housing needs to be built, and we're gonna have to accommodate different types of housing, whether it's a cute little group of garden courtyard apartments or a 4-story mixed-use building. So,
To answer your question, I think we can still maintain consistency, but still have accents throughout. So I don't think it has to be all the same.
mhm,
There's the opportunity to, when necessary, there could be something that's an accent to the design, right?
right.
And I think that's the challenge itself, because what I think of an accent, other may think of like imposing or challenging. So
Right.
I do think, to answer your question, I think it is possible.
Great.
And,
You know-
and to further, I think with our downtown character, I'm just visualizing, you know, walking through and thinking of what Hollister is about. We have parades, we have, street, you know, we block off streets, we have the summer, what is it called? The farmer's market, right?
Sure.
So I think keeping all those things in mind so that there's pedestrian accessibility when, you know, in whatever we do,
Yeah.
and that we keep that, and that's part of Hollister, parades,
Yeah.
farmer's market. So I think that's important somehow, putting
Yeah.
that in.
Well, that's where you get into the importance of massing and making sure that not every building is a flat
Right.
wall
Right.
fronted by a parking lot, which just does not feel like a family-oriented, you know, organic space. So absolutely. Another question I had, we don't need to move the slides, was who do you think we should talk to get good ideas? I mentioned that for sure. We'll talk to developers and the local development community. Is there
Business
anyone else you think
owners.
will have good businesses?
Young people, high school, you know, you have a lot of leaders there.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the Chamber of Commerce, the
Chamber, yeah.
Downtown Association,
Okay.
they're gonna be affected, so.
I know that there's an active, is it the Preservation Society, the Historic Preservation? They might,
The historical
they might
society.
adhere to a certain priority,
I think
but I think I
too,
want to hear from them and find out how, they might have ideas about what are the most valuable elements of these styles to bring in, so,
I think we have a lot of commuters, right, that have moved in, a lot of people that, you know, live here now that want to be a part of, and trying to get, that's why I was saying the social media pieces and the online pieces for those. I'm a commuter too, so, but I was raised in Hollister, but I know I have a lot of friends who live out of town, maybe don't have time, so having that. I think too, our stakeholders that are known in the community that do volunteer work. You know, I'm a part of one Latino coalition, for example, but there's others, right, that I think we
Absolutely.
can bring to the table.
Okay.
I think to our church community is very strong, our different faith-based, you know, again, speaking to, that's Hollister. Hollister is a small town.
Sure.
We all, you know, we try to know each other. We try to, so I
Yeah.
think, yeah, tapping into those.
Right, and that's why I'm trying to impress upon everyone that we're going to try to take from the priorities this town has already, you know, enforced or expressed. Because what I've learned across the state is that this is scary. Like, wait a second, you're turning our design into a bunch of numbers? Like how, so the real challenge of this is saying, no, let's transfer what we know you care about. And do our best to turn it into these quantifiable standards, which it can't be perfect. You know, sort of the motto of ODS right now is it doesn't ensure good design, it just prevents bad design. That's really the best these can do.
What's staff's plan on distributing the brochure and getting it to the residents?
So we will be working with, the city just hired a new IT director. We're also trying to revamp parts of our website. So this is one of those things that I intend to create a separate webpage that people can engage on. So kind of like our housing element had a separate page. So that's the intent. And then you'll see things hopefully on the front page. There's kind of these little like, this is happening now. We're currently in the process of the person that was working on our social media. They have since gone to another job. So we're working with our leadership to kind of figure out who we're going to be working with to establish that. And that will be another way that we'll be posting that and making it available as well.
And then, for city staff, we're gonna be implementing a checklist format too as well, if the ODS gets implemented.
Yeah, I think that will be the ultimate goal. So we'll make, what'll ultimately come forward for approval will be an amendment to our zoning ordinance to reference this separate design document. Then we'll have the design document itself that either itself will have a checklist or will have a separate checklist. And the way that it'll be implemented is for some of those laws that require a staff level ministerial approval, like SB 35, SB 9, those types of things. Those staff will be able to utilize the checklist, or what you'll see where we still do have that kind of site and architectural level that comes before the planning commission. You'll see us fill out that checklist, but then ultimately the planning commission will make sure that it complies with the checklist and agree in your decision making as well for housing projects. So it would be a checklist, and then it'll be used at all these different levels. But as we're seeing in the legal landscape with the legislature and their new laws that they issue every year, is more and more things they're taking down to that staff level, administrative, ministerial. And so you and the council will have the comfort of knowing that these are adopted and staff is implementing them on those projects that don't have the authority to come all the way up to the planning commission using that checklist.
If an applicant is rejected, you know, on that checklist, are they gonna have the opportunity to appeal?
Yes.
And that, just so that's something that goes into that front chapter of this is we always do a very, well, not always, because some cities rather keep it simple, but we do, you know, a step-by-step process of the review. You know, a lot of times we'll make a flowchart diagram, submit, first review, you get rejected, you can resubmit, or you want to appeal a decision that goes to the planning director only, you know, things like that, depending on the city's desires. But the document will certainly include a very clear description of the review process, so applicants will know exactly how it works.
Very fair and transparent
Yeah.
system.
Will it still come through the planning commission, or it'll go automatically through the checklist?
So the ODS in and of itself won't change our current processes. So everything that's currently coming to the planning commission will still come to the planning commission. But what we're seeing is more and more things are being taken away from that, like higher level of review, faster timelines, those types of things. And so we will have this in place to use even at the staff level, when we have to do a yes, no, quick review, you will know that everything that staff is seeing, we're going through that exact checklist and everything's just being treated exactly the same. And we're able to implement some level of design control, even as some of that control is taken away from the local.
So there could be multiple iterations before we even see it. So checklist, the back and forth between the applicant and staff.
Sure. Yeah. And that's already happening where we have the ability to work with applicants to change their projects, make sure they comply. We're already reviewing our code and projects against our code. But where our code currently doesn't have those objectives, we can only say, hey, this says that you should do this. Are you willing to make that change? But they can right now say, I don't want to do that and I don't have to comply with it. So we'll be having a little bit more of the you need to comply with this because you're not meeting it.
And all items on the final checklist, they're all equal weight, they all have the same weight.
Mm-hmm.
They have to meet all of them in order to.
Yeah. So,
Who's gonna be developing the checklist that we staff it?
yeah, and all it will be is a list of the standards that are in the document, just simplified in the same, organization. I mean, if you look at the slide up now, imagine, the checklist has a bold bar, site design, and it has the 10 standards. Building form has the 10 standards just written out, and then one column, complied, yes or no. So all it is really a truncated, summarized version of the 50 pages before it into a simple checklist. So really, creating that checklist is not a big task. It's just, that's where I can have some admin in our office make a nice looking sheet, just cutting and pasting the standards in. One reason I brought this page back up is to, first of all, stress that there's so much flexibility in this process. ODS sounds like a very quantitative, it is a very standardized effort, but the final product is so diverse across cities, and it's not really consistent with the type of city. I won't name any cities, but there are wealthy cities in the Bay Area. All they wanted was literally a 2-page sheet of basic standards, literally just the checklist basically, and not a document, whereas other cities or counties have an 80-page standards booklet with tons of graphics and designs and photographs. So, and it's not to say that either one is more valuable. It's just about the priorities of the city. And a simple set of standards is basically, you are further streamlining. If there's only 4 standards, it's a very quick process to review, and you are handing the design authority more towards the architect building. If she or he only has to say, all right, it's got to be this setback from the front line, it's got to include 4 recesses, 4 projections across the front, that's all I need to do, well, then I can bring in my design skills and do the rest. So that's a quick set of standards that gives design authority to the designer. The opposite being a very detailed, very thorough set of design standards that gives the city its further sense of control, but it reduces diversity in the buildings because every designer has to follow those very detailed standards. And it reduces the streamlining process because it takes longer to go through and make sure all those standards are met. So those are really the 2 directions a jurisdiction can go in. Simple standards to keep it simple and diverse, or very detailed standards to keep it complex, but everything the same looking. So I'm leaving you with that. And the slide you're seeing now is just to show you where, when we've done these, we usually start each section with what we call a design intent statement. So before the standards are even laid out for each section, it's just a quick, and this is not objective, this is a subjective statement saying these, the following standards are intended to create a warm, welcoming sense for pedestrians, or something that when the designer is going through these, she or he can at least say, all right, this is what they want. Now I understand where they're coming from. Here's the standards. So these documents can be more than just a bunch of numbers.
So the deliverable is not only the checklist, but a document that just expands on each checklist item with more than.
Oh, absolutely. Let's think of the document first, and the checklist the checklist is the very end. First, it's this very thorough, beautiful looking document, which will have a nice cover and pictures and graphics and yeah.
I'm assuming, right, because we're in earthquake territory,
Well, I mean, that's more the California Building Code, that's written more into existing state law. Oh, no, and again, and that's another issue is building height. This does not regulate building height, because building height is already a part of the traditional zoning standards. So, yeah, I know these are interesting distinctions, but this is really just about design. I had a slide for another city where I kind of talked about the difference between zoning standards versus design standards. But really think of them, zoning standards are those things you've been seeing for 100 years, floor area ratio, setbacks, building height. This is really just about the aesthetic quality of buildings.
Last question, is there any timeline associated with it, any milestones that must be met by certain times?
I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I believe we have about a year left in our grant. I think it ends in 2026. I'm not sure if it's like a summertime or a December, but I believe we have about a year.
Yeah, I have some dates on the outreach part. You can see that it would return to elected officials in October. So, meaning the document would be done in about a year.
And that would comply with the grant?
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes to, the value of a good noticing process. Make sure that this does go out on social media, and, it's. Yeah, it is a tough, when people see that wonky phrase, objective design standards, it can scare people away. And, we've had different luck in different cities with people participating. But, I think the value is going to be in this workshop. And we did have good luck with, creating boards where people can mark up and put designs and stickers and answer questions. And, perhaps starting with a survey that gets out to different populations, to youth populations.
Yeah. And we can inform you guys as our planning commission and lean to you and help us blast this to, so we'll make sure the planning commission and the council are aware of our workshop dates, and please help us tell the community, at least right now with our professional services budget and contracts. So there's some flexibility in like how many events we can have, but we will definitely do marketing regardless. I think there might be we'll have to look at the grant rules of what can be reimbursed, but as far as.
And Commissioner Perez, part of our agreement is to, create flyers and do some of the graphic front work. The document you've already seen, that brochure, we can easily tweak that and twist it and add a different title, and which we plan to do to, reshape it to fit a good social media post, things like that. So there is support from PlaceWorks as far as creating materials.
And my last question is, what would you say is the most prominent architectural style downtown right now?
Italianate, I think, is what pops into most of the past documents. Italianate. Any other questions? I hope that this was a good overview for the project. Again, thank you for having me. Staff, anything else?
I don't think so at this time. Yeah, we're just excited to finally kick this off. It's been something we've been trying to get towards for a few years now, especially with all the state legislature that's kind of pushing us towards this, having these types of documents as a tool in our toolbox.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, Planning Commissioner reports. Anybody have any?
Chair Belong, before we move on, I believe the 4 participants online are just our devices, but I do think we want to check. Okay, yeah, we don't have any speakers on that.
Okay. So we'll move on to item number 8, Planning Commissioner reports.
I do not.
None. I just wanted to ask, since we have a new commission, I don't know experience, but will we be doing any kind of Brown Act trainings or any type of trainings for the commission?
Yeah, we certainly can. I think that the city clerk did one for commissioners, and I don't know if the 2 of you attended.
Okay.
Okay. So,
I think we're all good then?
okay, good.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And then we'll move on to item number 8.2, Planning Division reports. Any reports from planning?
Yes, I would just like to report that on March 3rd, the city council did hear, if the planning commission is not aware, there was a referendum filed on the 2040 general plan adoption in December. And on March 3rd, the city council did hear the referendum and make a decision to repeal the 2040 general plan. So at this time, we don't have further direction on whether we're moving forward on another update of some kind, but we are operating under the 2005 general plan as we have been. So I know we talked a little bit about some of those policies in that document for coming forward with the objective design standards item, but it still is a goal of the city to do that. I know we still have, even in our current plans and codes, a desire to work in the downtown and keep that character and also develop the downtown as well. So I just wanted to let the commission know that as of March 3rd, the referendum decision was to repeal, the 2040 general plan. I don't believe I have any other updates.
Thank you. And it looks like we have no other agenda items, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. I'll call this meeting adjourned at 7:08. Thank you.